When you have a company of our size, this design could be leaked. That's why we decided to do the announcement many months before we actually launched.
Tell us more about the creative process.
We have 17 design centers around the world. I ask all of them to play with it. Even people that are not assigned to Pepsi.
Getting all of that contribution from all of these design centers, that would be a lot to discern.
You need to open up, or you risk to make decisions with your own biases, your own point of view of the world, having blind spots and making mistakes.
What gave you confidence this was the right solution?
There was still a lot of anxiety until the day it dropped.
How did you get over some of that anxiety?
I love this question because my name is Mauro Porcini. I am the Chief Design Officer of PepsiCo, and I've been leading this redesign of the Pepsi brand together with my team for several years now.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah, I like the Mauro. Like that's the real pronunciation, huh? You got to have like the roll of the tongue.
It's the AU and the rolling R are two sounds that are very tough for Americans.
Yes.
Often they say Mauro, and I don't know if they're saying tomorrow or they're talking about me or to me.
Yeah. I was joking.
Because I butcher, American pronunciations all the time. So I never get pissed because they butcher my name.
Yeah, that's good. So you're flexible, you understand. I was telling Kelly when she first logged on, I grew up on a farm in Middle Tennessee, small town. So my pronunciation skills are very low. I'm very likely to mispronounce a lot, but Mauro Porcini, that's how you said it, right?
Not really, but it's totally fine.
Mauro. That's the you. You're right.
That's
Mauro.
Perfect. You just did it perfect. Yeah, perfect.
See, you just have to slow down and think a little bit. We Americans are too fast. All right.
Yeah, you just say something so true. Americans, they always go straight to the point, right? And they go get to the point as fast as possible. Is the culture of efficiency. Italians love to go around and romance everything, and at the end they get to the same point, but with many turds and flies and jumps.
I love that. Yeah. Well, let's start way back before you even had this role at Pepsi. Do you remember your first, or maybe your earliest memory of Pepsi, as a kid or some sort of experience a long time ago? Do you have a memory that comes to mind with your first experience with Pepsi?
I totally do. And actually, I didn't have that memory until something reignite that memory, made me remember of something that happened in my childhood. I still have today all the notepads and in Italian we call them quaderni, where I was writing everything when I was at elementary school and then the middle school for geography, for Italian literature, mathematics and everything. A few of those quaderni, of notebooks, are Pepsi notebooks. I totally forgot about this until one day I was just going through all my stuff from when I was literally a kid. And I found many of these. And then I totally remember the point, the memory of buying them. I remember the place where I bought them. I remember, we didn't have a lot of money. So my mom would buy these packages of notepads all together, many. And I remember and it was always beautiful to go to the store before the school would start to go to buy anything you needed, the pencil and the different things where you put the pencil and the sharpener and the notepads. The notepads were the most fun of all because you have different designs and everything. And I remember falling in love with this Pepsi design. And then I totally forgot. And I joined the company. I had not recalling of that memory. And then again, I was going through stuff from my past and I found it and everything came back. And I still have them today. I unfortunately, I don't have them here with me in New York City. I keep them in the house in the Hamptons because it's such a fun story that I was connected to Pepsi from the very beginning. And so I love to share it with all my guests when they come to the Hamptons.
Oh, I love that. Do you keep a lot of your old sketchbooks and journals and
Yeah, I
little
mean,
creative experiments.
I keep stuff thanks to my parents. My parents were really good at keeping uh, some specific items. So I have things from my childhood, and because of this, I'm trying to keep other stuff for myself and for my kids in the future, so
Mm,
they have memories of our life. Now, in the case of my parents, they didn't move houses too much, so it was easy for them to accumulate things and preserve them. And me, I'm moving from place to place over the years. I've been moving a lot, but again, I'm doing a conscious effort to preserve some of these objects and things from the past, mostly thinking about the future, thinking about
mm.
my kids in the future.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I have fond memories of Pepsi as a kid. I would do weekends with my dad, and he would always have a 2 liter of Pepsi and a Domino's pizza. That was it.
The
That was
perfect
it. Yeah,
combination.
that's right. Yeah. So tell us about maybe the first time the idea of a change of brand for Pepsi emerged, because I believe you've been there for around 12 years.
Yeah,
And is that right?
yeah, I joined in July 2012.
Okay.
And one of the very first projects back then that Indra Nui, the CEO of the company back then, and Brett Jakeman, the president of Global Beverage at the time, gave me was the one of trying to unify the world around the new design back then.
Mm,
It was
yep.
designed the Peter Arnell and the PepsiCo team created in 2008, 2009. It came to market in 2009 in the United States. And then they started to roll it out in different regions around the world. But many regions, many countries didn't embrace it. They
Mm,
didn't take the new design. And they decided to go on with the old logo. And then even the old logo was presented on the can and the visual identity system in different ways in different parts of the world. So, long
mm,
story short, the brand was really fragmented
mm,
visually around the world. So, Indra and Brad asked me to come in and unify the world around the new design. And when they ask you something like this, you are the new chief design officer of the company. You have the full support of the CEO. You could take the project and the challenge in two different ways. One is, well, I have the support of everybody. I'm going to impose it somehow to the world. Not easy, because anyway, the management style of Indra was a style that was taking in considerations the needs of the different regions. There was a lot of empowerment of the different CEOs in the different parts of the world. Because if it was just top down, they didn't need Mauro to come in and try to unify the world. It would have been just mandated. But PepsiCo is like this. PepsiCo is a company that is really empowering the regions, really trying to localize these global brands. So that's what was happening. But still, with the support of the CEO, we could have taken that approach and be like, okay, we need to do it. It's just what big global brands do. The second approach, that is the one that I took, was the one of asking myself, before anybody else, myself, why they're not taking it. I mean, the easy answer is, well, the not invented here syndrome. Every country thinks that they're different and they have different needs. And that's partially the true. Often, when you don't embrace a global strategy at local level, there is that problem. But was it all? Was just the only reason? And so, as designers do, you ask yourself why, and then you ask people. So I started to talk with the different CEOs and business leaders in the regions, and then the bottlers, and then customers, and then consumers. And I started to get very consistent answers. A lot of people were telling me that the new design didn't have the energy of the previous one. And
mm,
it was pretty visible. The new design was very sophisticated. It was an aesthetic that was somehow trendy in the moment, coming from the world of Apple, of the new clean lines and very simple shapes, and very minimalistic, if you want. Something that you didn't see too much in the world of beverage or in CPG in general, in consumer packaged goods in general. And so there was this contrast between that, and the previous design was full energy with refreshment cues on the can, the big logo, a lot of movement, very dynamic. So there was that contrast. And the most of the people were telling me this is what Pepsi is about. Pepsi is about that. It's often the challenger brand in many markets, not all. Is the nature of the brand. We've been always like this, and so I realized that I needed to do something on that design that we had. And so we changed a few things, not in a visible way, but we did change a few things. We made the logo bigger, so the globe was bigger on the can versus the first execution. We changed the blue. The first blue was darker, was more recessive, so we used this more saturated, more brilliant, and more vibrant blue. We also tweaked the wordmark, the Pepsi word, by making it a little bit more bold, more fat, but in a very minimal way, so that people wouldn't notice the difference. The intent was to ignite energy into that design without creating the perception of a new design. And then we built a new visual identity system around the existing brand that we call Big Bold Blue for all the execution of the brand. Again, the intent was to give energy to the brand. And so we were able, in the way, to roll it out worldwide. In 2013, we started this rollout worldwide. Now, to answer your question, when did you know that you needed to start the redesign? Back then. I knew it right away. And it was difficult. We just launched a design, and that value, I mean, it was a beautiful design anyway, and we couldn't change it again, just after a few years. And so we decided to make the best out of it. We decided to invest then on limited edition packaging, so on a lot of different executions to build always that energy was typical of the brand. But we knew that sooner or later, we were going to redesign the brand. We knew it also because this is what Pepsi does. Pepsi is being redesigned every 10 to 15 years over the entire history of the brand. It's very different than our friends in Atlanta, Coca-Cola. They redesign. They have a different approach to their logo. Pepsi is being redesigning to keep up with the new generations. I mean, it was the brand, and it is the brand of the new generation. It's been always that, and so it's been the nature of the brand for many years. So we knew that it was already the nature of the brand, the fact that it was going to be redesigned in the future. We knew also there was an opportunity because of the lack of energy that the brand needed. And so from 2012-13, we started to think about what's next.
Wow. So you really played the long view game, knowing right when you came in that it was going to need to be updated at some point, but make the most of what you had now that had just launched. How did you, headed towards the most recent rebrand that we're talking about today, how did you start to build momentum internally that, hey, maybe we need a little bit more of an update? Were people just sort of naturally on board because of the rhythms of every 10 to 15 years, or did you have to really sell it and socialize that idea of bigger change?
I had to sell it hard, because anyway, these redesigns are very expensive for a company of our size. And so when you do redesign, you need to have very solid reasons. And then you need to have a case to justify the investment. And you need to expect a return on that investment. So this new design really needs to help boosting engagement, sales, value for the brand, and so on and so forth. What really helped was that the world changed radically around us in the past 10 years. So in 2012, obviously, internet was already there. We were already living in the digital world. But if you remember the role of social media compared to the role of today, the role of the digital technologies and digital platforms compared to today is radically different. And I remember my Facebook accounts or my Instagram accounts as an example in 2012. So for everybody listening to us, think about your account in 2012, if you even had one eventually. So imagine how different it is, the world today. And so this evolution of the world and the fact that these brands need to live in a more as protagonists in this digital world helps so much, because that kind of design that we used to have was not ideal for the digital world. We needed something that could live in the digital world in a better way. For instance, the connection between the globe and the watermark becoming one unit, and then building something around that we created when we did the design, so that the design could be ideal for the digital world. Design thinking already about the digital world, that for sure helped us a lot, making the case for change. The other thing that really helped was then when we started to prototype the new design and we started to share it and socialize it, people fell in love very quickly with that design. And then the COVID slow down the change. We were working on the new design before COVID. We started to visualize and think about what we could do, but accelerating an effort that started before. And then COVID arrived and obviously put everything in pause. And then towards the end of COVID, we restarted to dream of a new future for Pepsi.
Yeah, tell us more about the creative process. So you started to prototype and to explore how you could become more digitally forward or digital first for the logo and the visual system. What did that look like for your team? Did they go wide with hundreds of explorations, or did you give them specific direction, work on the type first, or what did the creative process look like in those early stages?
Look, first of all, we have been conducting a series of experiments, let's call them in the way, mostly on the visual identity system over the years. So I'll give you an example. What we call today the poles, that is these poles that emanate from the globe and is executed in different ways, with dots, with lines, in different ways, and is blending blue and black together, is something that we tested, for instance, at Super Bowl. It was the identity of the halftime show, the Pepsi halftime show, for several years before we launched it later in the... So for people, if you go back to the different celebrities that perform at the halftime show, and you look at the look and feel and the visual identity that we use with them and for them, you will see immediately the new design of the visual identity system already there. That's one example. But over the years, we have been testing ideas. For instance, we launched Vintage Pepsi. We launched the old logos and we different old logos on the can, or using the old logos celebrating different celebrities we had over the years, like Ray Charles and Britney Spears and Michael Jackson. And we were monitoring the reactions of people. So we have been experimenting directly or indirectly different solutions over the years. We also worked with agencies over the years, asking them, what will be the new design of Pepsi? What do you think will be the new design of Pepsi? So to get also different point of views from people not involved inside the company. And then during consumer research that we were doing on existing limited edition packagings, activations, we were often asking consumers, visualize the logo as it is today first, and often instead of visualizing, so sketching the actual logo as it was back then, they would sketch a globe with a watermark inside, like it used to be in the past. Even people that were not even born when we had the logo. So that's an example of how we started to realize that actually there was so much love for some of the assets from the past. So between designers, internal teams, consumers, conversations then without visualizing anything with customers, over the years we started to have a point of view. At a certain point, I asked my team, okay, let's dream of the Pepsi of the future, starting from the logo. So to answer your question, we started with the logo because you need to do it right with the logo. And I ask, we have 17 design teams, design centers around the world. Back then, let's say we're 14. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I ask all of them to play with it. Even people that are not assigned to Pepsi, even people that were assigned to the food business. We often do this cross contamination of ideas and everything. And so we started to get back a lot of different ideas, some crazy ones, some more safe, different kind of directions. And we started to see that a lot of people were playing with this idea of having the watermark inside the globe without knowing all the things we knew at the center, without the possibility to connect all the dots that we had in our plates. So even within our team, there was that love for this different visualization. And then, is the logo. And then we were asking them to apply that right away to the can. The can is the most fun platform to play with because you have so much space. On the bottle with the current label, you don't have a lot of space, but on the can you can really have fun. So there are pro and cons of this, but we asked them to visualize it on the can. And so that's how everything started. And we had a team at the center trying to connect everything together. Now, something interesting to keep in mind, I'm thinking about people in other companies, in other global corporations. This didn't start as a global project. This started as a US-driven project. That is pretty an anomaly because this is a global asset, this is a global brand. But we found in the US team, in the US marketing team, the perfect co-conspirators, as I like to call them. People that understand this, new idea and embrace it and want to develop it with you. So even if it was not idea, because a project like this should start as a global project, we decided to start this project with the US team, knowing from the beginning, as a chief design officer of the company, I couldn't allow for a new design to go to market in the US. It was different from the rest of the world. I came here to unify the brands. I couldn't let that happen, but we decided to take a chance and start working with the US. And then we were going to sell it to the rest of the world, to the rest of the business world. But from the very beginning, no matter it was a US project, we invited the team in Shanghai, the team in Cairo, the team in London and Mexico City, and so on and so forth, to be part of this project. Again, this is an anomaly because usually those teams are paid by the regions, by Egypt, by China, by the UK, and they're supposed to work on regional projects. But again, we asked them to work with us on brainstorming around different ideas. And then we always had the team at the center, filtering, assessing. And this is one of the projects for me where I was personally involved, where I could play the designer once again, because as in my position, unfortunately, there are so many different projects and I cannot be involved in all of them. I mean, we have hundreds of projects going on at the same time. We have hundreds of different brands in the portfolio. So every year I pick one or two or three projects where I am personally involved, and I can play designer again, because I love, this is what I love the most. And so that was one of those projects where I was really hand in hand together with the designers, at the point of, some ideas were directly sketched by me and then asking the designers to visualize them. And there is a specific story I will tell you later about one of these ideas that at the end went to market, and it's been very successful for us.
I love that. Yeah. So I would imagine getting all of that contribution from all of these design centers all over the world, that would be a lot for you to think about, to discern. What do we take? What do we keep? What do we move away from? How did you filter? What was your filter for landing on a direction that you would feel good about?
Look, I love this question because the answer applies to Pepsi and this design, but applies to everything I do at work, in my life, and I think is one of the superpower of every good leader. I'm very confident. I know that I know things. I've been studying a lot, and I keep studying. I will stop studying and learning the day I die. But I'm also aware that I make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes, that I don't know it all. I know just a little of, what is, out there. So I have a very humble approach as well. And because of this, I surround myself with people that are great designers that I really respect, that I really trust. And then I really value conversations with people out there, not just experts, but mostly people that think different than me, people with different point of views, different backgrounds. And so what I did, and is what I always do, is I talk with people. So we receive all these different designs. The first thing we do, obviously, is we review them with the core team. And then we take it out of the core team. We review them with a variety of different people within the design team. And then we take it out of that and we review them with the business leaders inside the organization. And then I take it out of that as well with a very informal process. We started to produce prototypes. We always do prototypes. It's never just something on a screen. So obviously, if you have hundreds of different ideas, you don't prototype it all. You need to screen a little bit up front. But then we start to create the prototypes. And so I started to share the prototypes with friends, with people that will come to my beach house in the Hamptons. I always have guests during the summer. So I actually have some of the prototypes here in front of me. I always had them here on the desk, both here in New York City and then in my house in the Hamptons. You can see this is the final design. But and I will always ask people, what do you think about this? I will keep them here by my screen, and in meetings with business leaders about other projects, I would ask them, what do you think about this design? Even with people not working, business leaders not working on the brand. So again, the way we filter it is a mix of what you know, your background, working on the brand for many, many years, and then conversations with experts and non-experts until you arrive to something that you think it makes sense. It's not a design by consensus. It's not a democratic process. At a certain point, you need the intuition, the leadership of the leader, of the core team, but you need to open up the conversation, or you risk to make decisions with your own biases, your own point of view of the world, having blind spots and making mistakes.
Yeah. And it is hard sometimes for people to understand the difference in input or feedback and decision making. They think that all of the feedback and all of the input needs to be implemented, and that's where it becomes design by consensus and waters it down. But everyone's opinion is welcomed in the design process. However, it does make it more difficult on the leader to discern because you get so much input. It can be almost overwhelming. This percentage of people didn't like this approach, but these people loved that approach. How do I move forward? The more input or feedback you get, sometimes it can really complicate the process. I think that's why a lot of people will minimize the feedback. They don't want all of that feedback because it does add to the complexities.
You're saying something that is so true. But we live in a world, forget even the feedback of the people around you. We live in a world where we have new, incredible opportunities to gather data that are very punctual, that are really, really good about anything we do. So to ignore that, to simplify the process, is a mistake, I think, and is also, the inability of leveraging a new opportunity of this new world we live in. Now, the problem is, and this is where often there is a misunderstanding, is that the data don't take the decision for you. This is why, for the time being, data and AI are not going to replace the role of the human being. You need somehow your sensitivity, your experience, your intuition, your ability to take risk, your ability to do something that nobody will expect eventually. That's what often innovation is about. Something that is not predictable through an algorithm, through AI, And this is the importance of the human factor in the world we live in, and the importance of what we call leadership. Because it's not just your ability to understand what is right, but it's also eventually your courage to take that intuition and push it through the system, going against people pushing back, your consumer research telling you eventually something that is different than what you want to do, or ignoring some of the information that you are receiving, the feedback you're receiving, taking the responsibility of taking the decision so that if it fails, then it's on you. And so there are many, many different variables, but this is what the human element is about, and this is what leadership is about. And it's really important, and it's an art at the end of the day, because it's really about balancing all the different variables, including your own know-how and background, to take the right decision. And it's not easy. And that's why at the end of the day, the most important asset that you can have for your company is the right people. You can have, all kind of platforms, processes, data, tools of any kind. But at the end of the day, people are the ones that make all the difference of the world. I wrote a book about this. I believe in this so much because in more than 20 years, 25 years, building design capabilities in big corporations, even before PepsiCo, looking at thousands of projects, the one that did well and the one that didn't, the one that were working and the one that they were not. At the end of the day, what was making always the difference were the people assigned to that project, how they think, how they act, how they behave, how they interact with each other. And so, again, that fine art of balancing all the variables and pushing the right solutions through is a human skill that is invaluable.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that perspective. I want to jump back to the beginning stages of the creative process when you were still prototyping, exploring, the word marks sitting inside the globe, and probably all sorts of iterations of that, especially the type and the color. Do you remember the first time that you saw what now is the Pepsi logo, or something that was very close to the 2023 rebrand? Do you remember the first time you saw it?
Yeah. So one day I told the team, we started to have, we knew by then that a logo, a watermark within the globe was probably the best idea. But we had so many different iterations of that, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so I asked the team to get together in our Pantheon, that is this big room that we have in New York City in our design center in Soho, and to print all the best solutions on the wall. And we were there, a small group of people, and we started to look at all of them. And you could feel the energy in the room of everybody converging towards this solution. So that was the day that I thought, okay, here we have something really strong. And after that, a couple of things happened. Let's say many things happened, but there are two that made me even more sure that even more confident that was the right solution. The first one was when we took that and we're like, okay, let's prototype this on a can. So we had prototypes and everything, but we did a few tweaks on that. So like, okay, after these tweaks, let's prototype it. The size of the logo on the can, the watermark, the typography and everything. So when I saw that can, the energy there was like, it was very powerful. The second step that made me even more confident was when by then I had the can. So again, I had this prototype in my hands, and I started to show this one together with a few more. Let's say by then we have 4 or 5 to people in Zoom meetings, in my friends, the design world, in a very informal way. And essentially almost everybody converged to this design. So by then we knew that we had something really strong in hands, and so everything changed from let's try to figure out exactly what we need to do to let's now try to sell it. Still learning, we're still listening. If there is pushback and challenges, we are ready to tweak and turn and change. But we move to pitching and selling more to get investments to make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. And was there a moment for you that felt like there was a lot on the line when you had to go and pitch it to additional leadership, where you're like, we have so much invested in this could be the make or break moment? Was there a meeting or a pitch that comes to mind that was really significant?
Yes. When we presented to the CEO, two key meetings, when we presented to the CEO, and then when we presented to what we call the PC, that is the PepsiCo Executive Committee. Because if Ramon Laguarta, the CEO, didn't like the new design, it would have been really tough, to push it through. Now, Ramon is great. So even eventually when he doesn't like something, he's always talking about the consumer. The consumer is going to decide, and he's also empowering the team. So it doesn't mean that it's impossible. You can still prove that actually, that thing is right, and he's super open to this. But obviously, it's all uphill if the CEO doesn't like, the design you're trying to push. And Ramon loved it. Then we took it to the executive committee, and that's another very difficult meeting, because you may have, PepsiCo has CEOs in each region, and these are people very powerful at the end of the day, because they run businesses that are worth several billions of dollars. I mean, PepsiCo is more than $90 billion. So divide that by the regions, you understand how big is this business. So if one of the CEO in one of the regions tell you, well, this brand is totally wrong for my region, worth X billion dollars, double digit X billion dollars, is again, the situation become complex. But also in the meeting, the meeting went well. And so after those two meetings, they're like, okay, we have the right support. Now, to get to those meetings, there was so much work done behind the scenes. So from the very beginning, informally, I started to get in the chief marketing officer, the chief operation officers of the different regions of the world. Again, not as part of a formal process, but in meetings we had about other things, I was always like, oh, what do you think about this can? I was not just collecting inputs. It's an hybrid. I was collecting feedback and inputs, but I was also starting to sell the idea, co-creating with them, feeling them they were part of the process, and they were, because over the years they gave us interesting feedback, and we tweaked things on the basis of what they were saying, or we pressure test some ideas, or they validate other ideas that we had. So once you had the key stakeholders within the organization with you, then we took it to the executive committee. And again, that was not an easy meeting, because it's a short meeting where you need to sell something that could change the trajectory of the brand in the future, and the company as well. So it was not an easy one. And then, by the way, there is your personal risk in all of this, right?
Yeah.
So, I've been kind of successful in my design journey over the years, in a very humble way, but life was kind to me. Let's put it this way. I didn't need to risk everything to redesign Pepsi. I could, without redesigning Pepsi, I was a good chief design officer in a big corporation, well paid, and with a good personal brand. Life was easy. Pepsi could, if I was doing Pepsi wrong, it could have turned everything and changed everything within the my perception within the company. But most in the design world, I would have been reminded as the guy that screwed up the Pepsi design. Nobody would have remembered the thousands of projects before. Everybody would have remembered the screw up of the Pepsi logo or design. And so imagine, even if you think, okay, this is the right one, imagine anyway the level of anxiety before you actually launch it, because it's enough that some conversation take the wrong spin in social media, and people start to destroy the brand in social media for some reason that you don't expect, for a blind spot that you have.
Yeah.
That things can go really south. So there was, even though there was all that confidence, there was still a lot of anxiety until the day that it dropped and it was finally out and people loved it.
Yeah. How did you find the confidence to get over some of that anxiety as you were working through approvals and all the risk that could come with it? What gave you confidence that this design solution was the right solution?
Well, I mean, I'll give you two answers. The confidence about the design solution was driven by the endless conversations and the converging of so many people towards those kind of design solutions. So, and this is not done in a 6 months project where you do two consumer research and then you have some data. You're like, oh no, this was done organically over the years. So at a certain point, I was like, okay, there are so many people within the organization and even outside that are liking it, that the probability that people will hate it when it's out there is kind of low. No matter that, a lot of people will be afraid or scared, or the level of anxiety could be very high when you do something like this. That's the reason why many people don't change. You are there, you have a position, you stay there a few years, then you move to the next company or the next brand or the next business unit. Don't screw it up, and you will still keep growing. I mean, that's unfortunately what happened often. Also because companies need stability. So if you're there, you have leaders that are able to manage the status quo and they still keep growing incremental. That's fine. If you have all these innovators and everything, there is a lot of variability, a lot of risk and everything. So that's why there are so many leaders that are very safe in companies of any kind. I am like many innovators. I don't like the status quo. I just get bored, and so my need of creating something different is stronger than my fear of screwing up. And it's always that. I mean, the definition of courage is always there at the balance between the risk you take and the difference between the status quo and what you're gonna get after you change the status quo. And so that's my nature. And that's, again, something so important when you identify leaders in your organization. A unique change is very important that you understand who are the change agents and who are not. And obviously your team needs to be a mix of people with different kind of characteristics. But often we put people in key positions because they did well in other positions, because they're good at a variety of different variables, but they may be totally wrong for the specific position or for the specific project. If, for instance, in that position, in the project, you need change, you need to drive change. The innovators and the designers in general, many of the, in the design world, change is part of what we do, because that's why they call you. You have something and you need to evolve it, you need to change it. So you need to find people that are comfortable with that change, that find energy and satisfaction out of that change. Now, it needs to be meaningful. That's why, for instance, I didn't pitch for Pepsi to be changed right away in 2013. It needs to be meaningful in two different ways. Before anything else, meaningful for the people we serve, the consumers, the customers. It needs to make sense for them. It needs to be at the right time, and you need to have a reason to do it. Then it needs to be meaningful for the company as well. It may be the right time for the consumer, but maybe it's not the right time for the company. So you need to deeply understand these two dimensions. But often you understand these dimensions, people need change, and that change could be beneficial for the company if you do it right. But then leaders are paralyzed and they don't drive that change, even if it's necessary. And then your brand starts to have this incremental decline that is eventually often slow, but still progressive. And so you keep brands in a certain position for too many years, and then when you need to change again, the situation may not be as good as in the past, when you were ready for the change and you could have done that change with a lower level of risk. So often something like this happens, or even worse, incremental decline, and then at a certain point there is a dip. Something goes really wrong because the world around you, competition or other new entrant in the category, are driving the change, and you find yourself now following and in a challenger position. And so change, when meaningful, become a very important competitive advantage and asset for these companies.
Yeah. I love the part about getting the timing right. And the timing might be right for the consumer, but might be wrong for the company, or right for the company and wrong for the consumer, and letting those variables be sort of the precise approach for getting the change management side just right. I think that's so smart and brilliant. going through the process of getting the CEO's approval, getting the other executive board and the markets and the regions, approval. Did you get any resistance? Did anyone raise their hand and say, wait a minute, Mauro, are you sure this is the right direction? Or I don't really like the black in there. The black's too dark. It's too heavy. We're not really a black brand. Did you get any resistance through that process?
We did. Yeah, we did in two ways. Some resistance from people that saw the energy in the brand, so the value, but they were like, okay, we don't really need it. Is the brand is doing well in the market, is a big investment. Why to do it? And then, let's say, once there was overall buy-in and we decided to do it, there was some resistance on timing. Why to do it now? Let's wait for one more year. There was some resistance on the details of that execution. For instance, one of the goal of this redesign was to celebrate zero sugar. That's why we introduced the black of zero sugar in the visual identity system. That's why all the communication is around the black can, the black bottle. Is all about zero sugar, even when we do the master brand approach. Even when you have other products, zero sugar is the driver. And so there were people who are like, well, our market is not ready for that. Zero sugar is a niche. And we knew it. I mean, Ramon Laguarta, that is driving this from the top, knows this very well. But we wanted to act as a leader and nudge the consumption of zero sugar through the design. Telling people, embrace zero sugar, buy zero sugar, put it on top of mind, visible everywhere, on coolers, in communication, on point of sales, because we want to drive the consumption of zero sugar. And so, again, is an act of leadership. And where people are like, oh, well, I don't know, my market is not ready yet. And so we got a lot of little micro pushbacks in different dimensions that together could become really problematic. And so we had to manage all of this. And that's why we have 17 design centers around the world, because the role of these people is to understand the global strategy and then work hand in hand with the local teams to make sure that we find the right solution for the region, to make sure that they are the ambassadors of the global strategy in the region, and they can explain the strategy to all the different key players in the region, but also to make sure that when there is some pushback that eventually makes sense, we can adapt the global strategy on the base of the local needs. We release a visual identity system with a specific guideline, very strict on how to execute the design across every touch point of the brand. But then in the months after, we've been tweaking that visual identity system, that, by the way, is a live document living in the digital world, on the base of some of the pushback on specific executions that made sense for specific markets. And so we tweak things over time as well.
Yeah. So you have the global strategy, you have the global vision, but then there's some flexibility for each market to adjust as needed.
We call it the glocal approach. But this flexibility needs to be art directed by people that are experts and that know inside out the global strategy. Else, it becomes a mess. And again, that's why we have these designers spread around the world, because they know really, really well the global strategy. And they also know how to take these, to have exceptions, to flex the global strategy in a tasteful way, in a way that is strategically aligned to the global vision, but that makes sense for the regions. Look, I'm Italian, and I had global roles out of Italy in my previous life when I was at 3M for many, many years. So I was the head of design for 3M, the tech company from Minnesota, from Italy, head of global design. And so I lead for many years this tension between the global directions coming from the United States, but I was part of the global team, but I was living there in Italy, surrounded by the employees of 3M Italy, and I could see that tension. And I could feel also the tension, and often you were getting these global directions that didn't make really much sense for the Italian culture. Often instead you were having pushbacks from Italy that didn't make real sense. It was really about the not invented here syndrome, protecting your turf. And so that was for me a very good school to understand that you need to listen to both sides, and then you need people in the region because they are the only one that can deeply understand the local culture. um, and you need to build a dialogue, very respectful, and find the right compromise and the right solutions. And so this dialogue is super important. Often I remember how many American movies about Italy, for instance, came out over the years with all these stereotypes about Italy and Italians, trying to be local, trying to really depict Italy as it is. And eventually, for non-Italians, is the perfect picture of Italy. And then we look at it, Italians, and we're like, okay, it's just, full of stereotypes that don't really make sense for us.
Yeah.
So that's why real innovation, real branding, successful, meaningful innovation and branding is defined by the nuances. It's not defined by the big ideas, by big strokes. It's literally in the nuances. Success is defined by the nuances of execution, and you need the right people to drive that. And when we talk about cultural differences, global and local, you need people that live between the two worlds, that can understand the two worlds and translate it in the perfect execution for the consumer you're serving.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think to get the nuances right, it takes time. So to understand on the local level and the global level all that's important, it takes time. And this was a long project, right? 3 to 4 years to sort of, maybe 12 years, in your mind, this is a 12-year project, it sounds like, but direct effort towards it, 3 to 4 years. What do you think caused that amount of time? Like, what were the biggest drivers for the 3 to 4 year timeline?
COVID slowed down things, because without COVID, it would have been a little bit, instead of 3 to 4, it would have been 2 years. So that was really what dragged things. But in other situations, one of the reasons could have been selling internally the idea. Often that is what is slowing down things. And and I don't see the 3 to 4 years in a negative way. Actually, I see it as a positive. It's possible exclusively if you have an internal design and marketing teams of creators. It's impossible to do it with agencies, because you wouldn't engage an agency for 3-4 years. It makes no sense. This was an organic process. The effort was proactive. It didn't start with the business saying we need a redesign of Pepsi. It started with the design team seeing the opportunity and starting the work proactively. We do a lot of these projects in that way. And it's something very powerful for the company, because obviously designers see the world in a very different way than marketers. And we may see opportunities that eventually the business team don't see. And so often we initiate proactive projects. Sometimes they go somewhere, sometimes they die, sometimes they become big hits and successes. And the company loves it. And it's not that the designer perspective is better than the marketer perspective. Marketers see many things that designers don't see. But if you don't have an internal team of creatives and creators and doers that have intuitions and then create around these intuitions, prototype the ideas, then you lose an opportunity. This is the big value. You don't need to do everything in-house. You can work with external design agencies. You should, because they bring to the table a fresh mind, different perspectives, bandwidth sometimes. So that's very important as well. But having an internal team is super powerful to really identify opportunities that eventually a different kind of background is not identifying within the company. And then again, you just need people in different parts of the organization. Sometimes it could be the design team, sometimes it could be the R&D team, it could be the marketing team, people to ignite these projects, prototype ideas, and then you bring others with you over time.
Yeah. I'm curious how you started to roll out all of this change. I know that it was connected to Zero Sugar and the 125th anniversary for the brand. How did you all start thinking about the announcement and the rollout and knowing the anxiety that you had personally about the effort? What were the launch plans like for Pepsi?
Look, first of all, the fact that the redesign of Pepsi coincides with the anniversary is a coincidence. We didn't design to be ready for the anniversary. We designed because the brand needed it. And then we're like, oh my God, the year we launched is the year of the anniversary. So we decided to link the two things. It was like, okay, this is God looking down because it's just perfect. Because in the year of the anniversary, obviously, you look at the past, you celebrate the past, and then you think about the future, the next 125 years. And this design has so much of this. This design is celebrating the past in the logo that reminds the logo of the past, but it's totally projected to the future with the use of black and this blending of blue and black and the poles. And you look at it, it feels really modern, but it feels also very familiar. Is this between nostalgic but also projected to the future? Is that blend? And what a better moment to celebrate this than the 125th anniversary. The second thing we needed to do was to think of how to tell the story. What was the ideal story? We needed to control the narrative. When you have a company of our size with hundreds of thousands of employees around the world, with a design that to be released will need to go through suppliers, through a variety of different people outside of the company, this design could be leaked months before it comes to market. And so that's why we decided to do the announcement that is pretty unusual many months before we actually launched. We announced, if I'm not wrong, in March, and it hit the market for the first time in September in the United States, end of August, beginning of September. And around the world, January, February, some countries we go in March. We have this rollout between January and December 2024 all around the world. And so the reason why we did it was because we wanted to control the story at the beginning in a positive way. We wanted the world to understand where we were coming from, the vision we had, the genesis of this design, even just the dreams and the intuitions of these designers and this marketing team, and how we came up with the solution. And so then we released the story to a series of media platforms, and we craft the right photography for the story. That sounds so obvious as I'm telling it, but often it doesn't happen. You see launches of new designs that are not crafted in the proper way from a visual standpoint and the narrative and everything. So we have been really, really careful in how to tell the story, even through images. The role of licensing, as an example, in the first set of photography, there were images of licensing we're going to do. The role of Pepsi cherry, with all these cherries all over the can, this explosion of cherry that people love to death. I mean, when we were developing the concepts, people really, really loved the Pepsi cherry. So we decided to give a very strong role to this specific flavor that is very important in our portfolio. And so you have this jacket full of cherries, and you have these Soda Stream bottles full of cherry, because we own the Soda Stream brand, and Pepsi is available also in Soda Stream. So in a sustainable way, with reusable bottles. So we craft the entire story, creating both a narrative that was both emotional and rational as well, that will talk about the key strategic and rational reasons for redesigning this brand, but also there was, without any word, will create excitement in the system and in the world out there.
Hmm. I was curious in some of the timing of releasing images to the media and the announcement, and then the distance to seeing it in the market. And I remember personally wondering, seeing old packaging or old can designs months later, thinking, I wonder when we'll see this, in the US. And I almost assumed it was maybe launching globally and it was just taking a while. But it's really interesting to hear the strategy of you knew it could get leaked. So let's go ahead and make the announcement. Let's control the story. And then it will slowly roll out in different markets, over time. I think it's brilliant.
Imagine if somebody take a shitty picture with an iPhone in a
Yeah.
factory of this thing, with the bad light printed, leak it to the media, and then the story, without
Pepsi
understanding
rebrand.
anything
Yeah.
what we're doing, why.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
the probability that something like this could happen is high because of the scale of the system we are in.
Yeah. Yeah. So as it rolled out, as you made those media announcements, was there any real criticism or blowback? Did anything come back, or was it all mostly positive? There's always opinions on anything
Yeah,
like this.
look, trust me, I'm really sincere. I was really surprised that there was no criticism. 99% positive sentiments.
Hmm.
And something like, I don't remember the exact data, but probably around 7 billion impressions in the first few weeks with 99% positive sentiment. And I'm saying this with surprise, meaning that when you redesign a brand that is renowned worldwide and that people love or at least know, there is always polarizing. The people love the new design and people don't. It's just human nature,
Yeah.
You may
Yeah.
love more than one before. And instead there was really unanimous consensus on this design. So for us was really great. This helps even our own reputation as a design team within the company.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
when you do right a design that is so visible, that is the name on the door of the company, it helps a lot in positioning design within the company as a driver of positive change and value for the organization.
Yeah. As you reflect back on this long journey, what would have been some of the key takeaways or lessons you might have from this effort?
First of all, always have the courage to change, to think big and change. As I said earlier, you may see the need of a change, but you may not have the courage to drive it. Life is so fun when you evolve and you grow and you change, and so you need to do it in a meaningful way. But it gives so much energy to you personally, to the organization, to the company, and then yes, things can go well, even if they don't go very well, they go wrong. You learn out of it, and that you will learn, you will capture the learning, and you will do better in the future. But change and evolution and growing is so important for your company, for your brand, and for yourself, and it gives a lot of energy. I didn't expect at all the level of energy that this redesign is giving to the entire company, to
Hmm.
the sales organization, to the people in different functions inside the company. I just didn't know. It was a big discovery when we did it, and this is energizing them on working on the brand beyond the design. The design is just a platform to energize all these people. They're all excited. They're all proud of being associated with this brand, even more than in the past, really, associated with this big redesign. So that was a very interesting thing that I discovered as well in this process. So the first thing is think big, have the courage to drive the change. Um, and then when you drive that change, you need to be ready to change mind. You need to be ready and open to feedback, to the challenges that people share with you, and this is very important. Finding the right balance between your vision, your intuition, but also understanding what people is telling you, and try and be ready to change direction and change mind on the basis of those feedback. But trust yourself, trust your intuition. So don't fall in the other trap of the lack of confidence and being paralyzed. As we say in America, the analysis paralysis. That's another problem that you may face. So find the right balance, trust you, be confident, trust your intuition, but also listen to others.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that. The balance of it is everything. So important. What do you hope the future holds for Pepsi and the brand?
Look, we are gonna double down, and the redesign was one of the platforms to really um, ignite that doubling down on zero sugar. We really, really want to grow that platform, and that's one dimension. Then Pepsi, as I said earlier, is also available in SodaStream. That's one of the efforts we're doing to make the entire system more sustainable. And SodaStream is ideal because you reuse the bottle. So reusability of the bottle is super important. I mean, this is the most sustainable thing you can do. But then we're working on more sustainable packaging, reducing plastic, finding different kind of materials. So there is a lot of effort to make the entire platform more sustainable. And the goal overall is to keep Pepsi the brand of the new generation, to keep Pepsi a brand that is loved by the new generations that will come over the years. And that's why I mentioned right away zero sugar and sustainability, because to be the brand of the new generation, we really need to double down on these dimensions, and also understand in 20 years, in 40 years, in 60 years, what those generation will want. What kind of soda will be the Pepsi of 2050? It will be zero sugar, full sugar. Probably full sugar will be smaller than what it is today. It will be zero sugar enough. Maybe there will be something else. How we will consume this Pepsi? We'll consume it still in a can or in a bottle, or there will be different ways to consume the Pepsi. We've been launching over the years a variety of different dispensers, smart dispensers of sodas and drinks of any kind. So without releasing too many information, there is a lot of research that we're doing within the company to imagine the Pepsi of 2050 and 2100, and actually the future in general.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Mauro, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for retelling the story. I think it's fascinating. I love so many takeaways for me. I love the patience to socialize, the patience that you had over 12 years to think, how do I stage the rebrand at the right time for the consumer, for the company, having patience through COVID, having courage to say, now's the time, let's really push for it. I think it's all amazing. And so many people are going to listen to this and learn from it. So thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.